If you're new at Hope, just want to tell you that we're really glad you're here. And I just add my welcome to what Drew said and hope that you're encouraged and helped by being at Hope. So maybe by now everybody knows we're in a series that's really focusing on the future and on this next season of vision for Hope's future. And if you want to think about the future, as Drew said, then you got to think about younger people, and then you got to focus on little kids, because we all know that the future is in the hands of kids. It's not in the hands of me and people older. It's in the hands of the next generation. So it's really encouraging to me and to our elders and other leaders that we really do feel like God's led us to the focal point of this next season, where the lion's share of the investment is in the next generation. And we're excited about that. Maybe you know, but you could read statistics that would tell you that about 80% of people who are Christians became Christians before the age of 18. So if you're kind of an analyst, a business-like mind, then you would say, well, if 80% of people who are Christian became Christians before the age of 18, that would suggest you should deploy your energy on people who are under 18. And there's a lot of truth in that if you look at the analytics of it. Now, Hope is kind of a neat place because there are a lot of people who are an exception to that. There are lots of people here who have become Christians after that age. I became a Christian when I was just shy of 20. But if you look at those numbers, it would say, yeah, invest dramatically in this generation. So we're excited about that. Just to give you a little bit more information, if you didn't receive one of those packets, please pick one up out in the concourse. It's got all the supporting information and diagrams and brochures and so on about what we're trying to do. And the weekend of October 18th and 19th is the weekend when we're inviting everybody to make a financial commitment to the next season of Hope. We're praying like crazy that God will move. It's not a foregone conclusion. Some people might think, oh, well, I guess they just kind of have planned this and it's kind of a given. It's not. We're praying like crazy that God will move in our hearts and help us to stretch. That's the word that we're really inviting everybody to. And as you pray about your part in it, would you pray about the word stretch? God, what would it mean for me or for my family to stretch in terms of commitments to this? And so October 18th and 19th is Hope's 17th birthday weekend, and that'll be a neat weekend to celebrate together. So we're talking about this idea of vision. We're talking about the future. And vision, you could say, is a describable picture of a future reality. But you know, sometimes we struggle in life with an absence of vision. And sometimes we don't know and appreciate how significant and helpful vision is until perhaps we've had times in life where it's felt like there's an absence of vision. Like, for example, maybe you've felt a season in your life where you felt stuck. And by stuck, I mean it's more than just an incidental, indecisive time. It's that your life is beginning to feel stuck. And this comes with some sense of uncertainty about the future, and you're not quite sure what to do next. Usually what comes with a period of feeling stuck is also a sense of low motivation. Really hard to get motivated, to have the desire and the momentum to want to really kind of keep pursuing the future. Sometimes what comes with this is a low grade or even more than a low grade feeling of depression. These combinations of factors, a sense that I can't really see a desirable future, I feel like I don't have any motivation or energy, I feel like I may be pushing back some tides of depression. These things come together and they can make us feel like we're stuck. And if you've ever had a season like that, which I've had some of them in my life, it's hard. And it's not a place that you want to be. And you realize you need help. You need somebody. You need the help of a friend or a family member or spouse. You need God's help to reinvigorate a sense of hope for the future and vision for the future. So now we begin to realize that the words hope and vision are very distinctly connected. Martin Luther, the reformer from the 1500s, said that anything that is accomplished in life is accomplished by hope. And what he's saying is, hope is this motivation where we have a picture of a positive future, and we feel drawn to it, excited about it, whatever word you want to use, and we move toward it. And he says everything that's accomplished is accomplished through hope. But if you've ever been in one of these seasons where you feel stuck, and by season I mean it lasts a while. It's not just like a downer of a day. It feels like it's moved into your life, and it's very difficult to shake out of it. This can happen in a variety of times of life. Perhaps you're graduating from high school or college, and all the momentum and all the voices around you say it should be all hitting the throttles, making decisions and going for the future. And you may be feeling like, I don't really know what I want. I don't really have a picture of what I want to go after. I'm not sure what I want to do. And you can begin to feel stuck and a sense of lack of motivation and lack of desire. And you sort of feel like it overcomes you and you feel stuck in it. Maybe you have come out of a very difficult relational breakup or a really difficult relational situation, a loss of a job. And you begin to just feel stuck. You begin to lose momentum. You begin to lose hopefulness and vision of the future. It's not a fun place to be. Maybe you're approaching middle age, which now I think is approximately 70 years old, is middle age. And maybe you're starting to think, maybe some of the things that I hoped, maybe they're not going to happen. Maybe they're not going to materialize. And you begin to feel a little bit adrift. And you can begin to lose a little bit of hope and a little bit of vision, and a little bit of optimism about the future, and you can begin to feel stuck. Retirement is a time where people sometimes talk about this. So we begin to realize we really do want vision. It's essential to a sense of hopefulness and moving forward. In Proverbs 29, in the old King James Version, we're told, without vision we perish. I think what that's doing is it's helping me see and sort of target what we're talking about here. Without vision, we lose a sense of optimism or hope about the future. As we begin to lose a sense of optimism or hope about the future, we begin to feel adrift, and then we begin to lose motivation. We can begin to feel depression. And you keep compounding one thing to another, and we begin to get really stuck. Add that stuckness and compound it over time, and it just feels like deadness. And so the scriptures say, without vision, we perish. We want vision, and we want clarity, but every so often we wrestle with it too, right? Here's an example. Let's say you're a parent and you have children. Actually, you don't even need multiple. Just one will do the trick for this illustration. And so there's an upcoming thing that we're going to do together, and the child or children are saying, well, where are we going to go, and what's it going to be, right? And they're eager, and they're anticipating, and then finally, as a parent, you say, here's what we're going to do. And sure enough, one or more of the kids is like, that's not what I want to do. So yes, then there is vision, and then somebody says, well, that's not what I want to do. This is pretty normal in the endeavors of vision as well. Let's take another example. It's not quite a stuck place, but it has elements of it. Let's say you want to redecorate a room, okay, in your apartment or in your house. And you want to repaint it or wallpaper it, and you want to get some different furniture, and you really want to freshen it up. So you go to a home furnishings store, and you walk in, and a salesperson comes and says, hi, can I help you? And you say, well, I have the living room at my house, and I just want to kind of really freshen it up. And they say, well, what do you want? What do you want it to look like? And you say, well, I'm not sure what I want it to look like. And I was hoping you could help me with that. And so the person starts showing you some pictures. Would you like this? And you're like, nah, that's not what I want. Well, how about this? Nah, I don't want that. Well, let's look at some paint colors. How about this? No, I don't want that. And then how about this? No, I don't think I want that. And what we begin to realize is, I know I want it to be different, but I don't really know what I want. And this happens a lot. And we need somebody to help us develop a sense of what is it that we really want. In other words, I don't know what I do want, but keep showing me ideas and I'll keep telling you what I don't want. That's similar to a stuck place with vision. Visionaries, studies would suggest, are very much the minority of personality types, okay? Visionaries are people who In their head, they live in the future. They live in the future tense. They're constantly thinking about possibilities and what could be. Visionaries, yes, you could say they're dreamers. They're also people who spend most of their internal mental energy thinking about what the future could look like. A new way, a better way, a different way. But statistics and studies and personality tests tell us that people who are wired that way are very much the minority among all of us. And when we're stuck, we begin to realize we really want some visionaries around. Now, the challenge is the visionaries share ideas, and then we're like, nah, I don't want to do that. Nah, I don't want to do that. But you see, we wrestle with it because we want forward momentum. We want the hopefulness and the vision. So visionaries are people who live in their heads in something of what could be. I love the story about Disney World. And as the story goes, it was about 10 years after Walt Disney died. And a number of journalists had come for a tour. And as they're getting toured around by Disney's successor, CEO of the company, they're seeing all this really cool stuff that's come about since Disney died. And one of the reporters says to the successor CEO, "Wouldn't it be exciting if Walt Disney could see this now?" And the guy says, "Walt Disney did see this, and that's why it is what it is now." You see, we really want those visionaries, and we really need them, and we really are looking for that sense of God giving us a hopeful picture of the future. A hopeful picture of the future is one of the best ways you could describe vision. We do this a lot with little kids. We say to little kids, you know this, right? You were asked it a bunch when you were a little kid, and we ask it to little kids. We say to them, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's a distinctly vision-oriented question. Now, some kids will say, I don't know. Other kids will say, I want to be a fireman or a lawyer or a surgeon or, you name it. But vision is a clear picture of what the future looks like. Visionaries live with this in their head all the time, and visionaries and non-visionaries often have to learn to appreciate each other. Visionaries get frustrated that non-visionaries are not compelled by a vision of the future, and that they can't seem to see it or understand it or get excited. Non-visionaries get frustrated with visionaries because they sort of feel like, you need to come back down to earth and live in the real world, right? And so we begin to realize that you could call them dreamers and realists. And dreamers and realists need each other. There's no sense in saying one is better than the other, right? We've got to be careful not to do that. But we need each other. And vision is essential to the life of any vibrant organization. So let's take a look at Nehemiah. Nehemiah, book in the Old Testament. Nehemiah is a Jew, and there's a lot of history of Israel wrapped up in the book of Nehemiah, which I'm not going to go into in depth. But Israel had been struggling through their history of being taken captive by the Babylonians and then overtaken by the Persians and dispersed all over the Middle East. That was part of the way an invading army would disperse a population so that they wouldn't have a unified kind of central power. And so we're in the time where Israel had been overtaken by the Persians. And the Persian king is Artaxerxes. And Jerusalem, that is the home of Israel, has been just decimated. But Artaxerxes, for some reason, decides to allow some Jews to return to Jerusalem. So fragments of Jews are returning to Jerusalem. Nehemiah is a Jew, and this is crucial to the story. He's a cupbearer to Nehemiah. Okay? So he's a Jew, but he's a cupbearer to the Persian king. He is uniquely positioned to make a difference for God's people. He's a cupbearer to the king. You might be like, what is a cupbearer? Is it the guy who brings him his wine? Well, it's the guy who drinks his wine before the king drinks it to ensure that it's not poisoned. All right, this is constant vigilance for ancient kings. Their food, their drinks, etc. So whenever a plate of food or a drink was put before them, they had somebody else eat some of it and drink some of it first. They waited about 10 minutes while they're all sitting in the same room to see if the guy keels over or not. So a cupbearer sounds like a pretty important job, but it's a fairly risky one. So Nehemiah is the cupbearer to Artaxerxes. Nehemiah appeals to Artaxerxes. And here's the story. Hanani, one of my brothers, this is Nehemiah writing, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. I asked them about the Jews who'd survived the captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. They said to me, things aren't going well for those who returned to the province of Judah. They're in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been burned. When I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands, listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. So Nehemiah is getting a report of, how are things in Jerusalem? And the report is things are not good in Jerusalem. In fact, the walls of the city have been decimated. In those days, a city was protected by large walls around it. It was the very security of the city. So if the walls are gone, the city is completely vulnerable. That's a bad sign. Secondly, the gates, that would have been the gates that would have been between the walls, are gone. And so the city is in ruins and it's completely unprotected. When Nehemiah hears this, notice what happens. He wept, he mourned, he fasted, he prayed, and then he confessed. Part of what you got to understand is, so woven into the Jewish mindset was the idea that the well-being of Jerusalem was inextricably linked to the glory of God in the world. They were absolutely connected. And so as Nehemiah hears that Jerusalem is in shambles, what he is deeply grieved about is not only the geopolitical situation for these people, but to him it also meant the glory of God is being lost in the world. And this is deeply, deeply grievous to him. All right, so you want to get invited into some Bible stuff here? I wonder if you have ever been deeply grieved at the idea that the glory of God has been forfeited or lost. Now, to be honest, I think many of us would say, such a thought has never crossed my mind. You see, it tells a little bit of our sense of our relationship with God. We've been raised in a very independent, self-serving culture where, one way or another, we've turned God into a cosmic vending machine who's supposed to make our lives go well. So our vision was not so much about the glory of God, but whether he's making our lives go well. Well, not so in the scriptures. Nehemiah hears that things in Jerusalem are in shambles, and he is deeply grieved about it. Not only because his people are spread all over the place and the city's in bad shape, but to him it meant the glory of God is lost in the world. The result of that in this guy's heart, he wept, he mourned, he prayed, and then he fasted and he confessed. Notice he confessed. He's asking God to forgive him, his family, and the people of Israel for the ways that they've been disobedient. Now, part of the problem back in that history of Israel was the people who God had called to this beautiful relationship with him had given their hearts to every foreign god in the land. They had allowed their hearts, for whom God had given so much of himself, they just gave their hearts to every shiny thing that appeared to offer them a trinket. And that's a challenge for us, isn't it? Let's be really honest. That's a challenge for us. And so as we embrace the idea of vision, Nehemiah was distinctly a visionary. Nehemiah begins to develop a plan and a picture of a rebuilt Jerusalem. But it's not just about a city, it's about the glory of God to him. And that's what matters so much to him. If you read through the book, it says he mobilized everybody he could, gathered as many as he could in Jerusalem. And in 52 days, the wall was rebuilt. Once the wall was rebuilt, they could start rebuilding the city. But it's really important to note that Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king. He knew that he had unique access to make a difference for the glory of God. So here's a question to all of us. And it's a question for all of us to think about with the future of hope and our lives and how we serve God. What are any of the unique ways God has placed you, blessed you, supplied for you, called you? What are the unique things of your life where God could use you uniquely to advance his glory? It's an important part of the vision question, and it was certainly part of Nehemiah's understanding. So vision is not an easy thing to always clarify. When I think about the church, we all know that there are ways that we look at church and we ask the question, do I like it, right? I know this about all of us, right? Do I like it? Do I like the teaching? Do I like the music? Do I like the ministry? Et cetera, et cetera. We all know that that's part of it. But the fundamental question is not, when we're talking about the church, the fundamental question is not, do we like it? The fundamental question is, does God like it? Is God really pleased with his church, with the way we are being his people and serving him and serving his heart? The fundamental question is not, does it give me programs and experiences and religious customer service experiences that I like? The fundamental question is, does God like it? And this is what I pray about all the time. And maybe the word haunt is a little too strong, but it's in the back of my head all the time when I think about my role in leadership of hope. Pray about it all the time. God, please help us be what you want the church to be. We could all put all kinds of ideas all over whiteboards all over the place. The question is, God, what do you want it to be? And that's been so much a part of the process and the prayer and the deliberation and the debate among our elders and senior staff as we've sought to come to this new season. Now, one thing I have to sort of ask for maybe is some grace. That doesn't dismiss me of having some self-control. But when I get talking about vision, I get kind of amped up. It's like the thing that kind of amps me up the most, right? And Elizabeth, God bless her, gets a little nervous when I get amped up because she's like, okay, think about how you could say that a little more gently, right? All right, so, but when I think about vision, years ago, I was in my mid-20s, about 6 or 7 years ago, and I was in a leadership development seminar, and there's a bunch of us guys in our 20s, and the guy who was leading it was a guy named Bob Beal. And that many years ago, Bob Beal was a big deal as a kind of business leadership vision consultant. So he's leading this thing, and he's trying to ask all of us to articulate a vision that we saw for our call and for the future. And that's not easy necessarily to do. So people are asking questions, and what do you mean, and how do I do that, and so on. And so Bob says, well, think about it this way. What makes you weep or pound the table? Right? So we're all like, what? What makes you weep or pound the table? And so somebody had the guts to ask, what does that mean? He said, what is there in the world that when you hear about it, it makes you weep, or it makes you pound the table and say, something has to be done about this? So, as I was thinking about what makes me weep or pound the table, it wasn't hard for me. I became a Christian when I was 19, almost 20 years old. And God changed my life so completely. You can hear all the metaphors, like from black and white to color, like from death to life, from self to God and others. Here's what I know. Before I knew God, my life was really all about me. It was my vision. It was my everything. And I was vain, self-centered, self-focused, and it wasn't good. And when God began to move into my life and things began to change, I know how incredibly he changed the direction, the thoughts, the feelings inside of me. And now I'm like so full of love for God and love for people and this sense of joy in life. I'm like bursting with all of this. Okay, so I'm a new Christian, and I'm like, well, I guess you're supposed to go to church. And I didn't know much about churches or good churches or this church or that church. So I would go to church, and my heart is like exploding with this desire and love for God. And I would sit in church and I'm like, wait, is anybody else's heart in here like exploding for God? Because I feel like I'm being put to sleep, and we cannot do that. And I'm like, does anybody care? Does anybody care that there are people who are so hungry for life, and we're putting them to sleep in here? And so when Bob Beal said, what makes you weep or pound the table? I was like, what makes me weep or pound the table is somebody has to do something to help people have an opportunity in the vibrant expression of God's presence to know life and a relationship with him. We can't just do it the way we've been doing it. So it wasn't hard for me to have a sense of, wow, okay, what makes you weep or pound the table? So to me, it's all about changed lives. It's all about changed lives. And maybe that's autobiographical, but hey, all of us operate out of an autobiographical story. And I know that the way God has moved in my life and the changes he's made, I want to give my life to help that happen for as many people as possible. That's what I get excited about coming to work for, is helping people's lives be changed by being introduced to a new life relationship with Jesus Christ. That's my passion. That's my heart. So Hope's vision statement is a statement that has been around for a long, long time. A catalytic church offering the gospel of Jesus Christ to as many people as possible, as creatively as necessary. Okay, catalytic means a change agent, right? That's part of it. We got to do it differently. And not just once. We have to constantly be adjusting and changing to be effective in the environment that we're in. Offering the gospel of Jesus to as many people as possible, as creatively as necessary. The creatively as necessary part is what keeps us saying things like, well, this is why you have an app for smartphones. This is why you do holiday services off-site, to try to help as many people as possible have an opportunity to be exposed to God. Periodically, when I'm out around Richmond, people will come up to me in a store or a restaurant or something, and they'll say, hey, I've been to Hope Church a few times. And I'll say, I'm so glad. A little while ago, about 10 days ago, somebody said to me, hey, are you the pastor at Hope Church? And I didn't say this, but my immediate thought was, well, do you like it or not? Because if they like it, yeah. And if they don't, then Pete Boel's the pastor of Hope Church. But anyway, she said, are you the pastor of Hope Church? And I said, yes, I am. And she told me about her experience. She said, I've been there 5 times. And she described to me what was happening when she's here. And I'm just telling you, nothing makes me happier about the work that we get to do than help people like this. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. And I said, it sounds to me like God is moving in your life, and he wants to introduce you to his love and to life and a relationship with him. And we hugged there in the line in this restaurant. And I just said, God, thank you so much. One of the things about life that's strange, I think we're wired to look for a life of self-fulfillment and self-satisfaction. I can say from my own experience that I don't know exactly how this all works out, but when I'm looking for self-fulfillment and self-satisfaction, I find that I feel very unfulfilled. I begin to feel stuck. I begin to feel very adrift. And I begin to feel like, gee, there's just no real fulfillment here. But when I begin to be drawn again into a vision of who God is, God in my life, God in the world, the glory of God, the beauty of God, God moving in people's lives and drawing them to life and a relationship with him, that's when my heart comes alive. So Jesus said in Matthew 28, go make disciples of all peoples, nations. And he talks about what that looks like and how it works. But what he's saying is, go help as many people as possible have an opportunity to know life and a relationship with God through Christ. In John 10:10, he said, I came that they might have life and have it to the full, or have it abundantly. So I heard years ago, if your vision is for 1 year, plant wheat. If your vision is for 10 years, plant trees. If your vision is forever, plant people. You see, changed lives is what changes the world. There's a lot of good stuff that any healthy church should do. Social relief work, caring, helping people, etc. But if hearts and lives aren't changed, that's all Band-Aids. It's the deepest matters of life change, heart change, that's at the core of the mission of the church. I don't know how often we think about this, but if we're a church, there's work to do. There's work to be done. And sometimes over the years, I kind of hear the tone that people use when they've talked about the church sometimes. And you can just tell by the tone and the words they use that the church is kind of a cute, nice, recreational game. And it just kills me. I'm like, this cannot be a quilting bee where we serve each other cucumber sandwiches with a crust cut off. We can't do that. I see in the scriptures this river that is a redemptive movement. And I believe to the core of my being it's what God calls us to be a part of. So I heard a guy say every organization lives in one of three places: incline, recline, or decline. And each one has a time period associated with it. Incline is always looking toward the future. Recline is always looking at the present. I like it the way it is. I don't want anything to change. Decline is always looking at the past, talking about the good old days, way back then, the way it used to be. So for me, two of those three give me nightmares. Recline and decline have me waking up at the night in a sweat saying, no, God, no, God. And so part of the incumbent call on leadership is to keep vision alive, keep our focus on the future of who God is and what he does in the world. And that's what Hope Place is about, a new season, a new opportunity for a new generation. So as we embark on this together, I really want to ask you to pray about it. Don't make a commitment because you just got to get it done and check it off your to-do list. I really want to ask you to pray about it. And I'm going to close as the worship team comes up with a prayer that is attributed to Sir Francis Drake. Francis Drake was an explorer. You may remember him from high school history. He sailed from Portsmouth, England, on a ship called the Golden Hind in 1577. And this is the prayer that he purportedly prayed. Disturb us, Lord, when we are too pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dreamed too little, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. Having fallen in love with this life, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of the new heaven to dim. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wilder seas, where storms will show your mastery, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push into the future in strength, courage, hope, and love. And this we ask in the name of our captain, who is Jesus Christ. Amen.
Will you please stand and sing with us as